You sit at the imperial table, legs swinging beneath your chair, barely tall enough to see the servants' faces. The marble floor gleams under torchlight. Outside, Rome groans under heat, but inside, cool walls, quiet footsteps, silence. You're her youngest, her last. The others are gone. No one speaks of them now. Not at dinner, not when the slaves are near. She watches you from across the table, the Empress, your mother. Her hands are folded in her lap. Her rings catch the firelight, but her eyes don't move. A servant steps forward, a silver bowl, figures, your favourite. He places the bowl gently in front of you. You reach for one, its skin split just slightly, sweet scent rising. She smiles, just a little, almost sad. You don't notice. You're only a child. You take a bite. The flesh inside is warm, software, almost too soft. You wrinkle your nose but swallow anyway. She watches. You think she's proud. You finish the second one before your stomach turns. You don't say anything at first, just shift in your seat. Your throat feels thick. Your hands go cold. You reach for your water and drop the cup. The sound echoes across the stone. She still hasn't moved. The servant steps forward, but stops short. He's pale, sweating. You see his hand twitch. You try to stand. Legs buckle. Your vision narrows. The fig rises in your throat, sour now, as if it knows what's happening. You fall forward, hit the floor hard. No one screams. Not her, not the guards. Only the sound of your breath, short, ragged, clawing its way out. You look up. Your mother is standing now, one step forward, not fast, not slow, calm, like she's rehearsed it, like she knew. She kneels beside you, cradles your head, whispers something you can't hear. Her hand is cold, not shaking, just resting on your chest. You try to ask why, but your mouth doesn't work anymore. And before you can understand what she's taken from you, the world goes dark. They bury you quietly. No procession, no drums. The Senate sends a message of condolence. A marble plaque is carved. The people whisper about fever, spoiled meat and curses, but not about her. No one speaks her name near fountains or temples, not where echoes might carry, because everyone knows. They just can't prove it. The fig wasn't the first. It wasn't even the worst, just the last one that was ever seen. She wasn't born a monster. She was born into a house that made them. Before she wore the imperial purple, before the title of Augusta curled across her name in gold ink, she was just a daughter. The third, unwanted, forgotten by Rome until she learned how to make Rome look back. Her father taught her the value of silence. Her mother taught her nothing at all. She died when the girl was 6. A fever, they said, or poison, or childbirth. The stories changed, but the emptiness stayed the same. The house remained cold. The walls were too thin to hold secrets. She learned to listen before she learned to speak. There were always footsteps outside her room. Soldiers, slaves, scribes, men arguing in low voices, the occasional scream. Politics wasn't something she read about. It lived in her house, wore her father's armour, and ate at her table. She understood early that power didn't wait for permission. It took what it wanted and dared others to stop it. At 12, she watched her older brother die. A carriage accident, they said. But she saw the bruises, the blood crusted on his tunic, the broken jaw. He hadn't fallen. He'd been pushed, and the man who smiled at the funeral now sat closer to her father each night. She kept her face still and said nothing. At 13, she was betrothed to a man twice her age, a senator, old, hands trembling from too much wine and not enough fear. She married him without protest, smiled through the feast, listened as he described the rooms in his villa where her duties would begin. She never moved into them. 3 weeks after the wedding, he fell ill, a stomach complaint, or bad oysters, or a pinch of something in his wine. The physicians argued. She didn't. She was widowed before she turned 14, and very, very wealthy. The second marriage came quickly. A general this time, younger, stronger, cruel. She bore him a child within the year, a boy, pale, thin, always coughing. The general called him weak, useless. He spent more time with concubines than with his own son. So when he died in a hunting accident, few wept. Fewer asked questions. She did. Not aloud, not to others. She asked herself whether she felt anything at all. She didn't. Her house grew quieter. Her child grew sicker. She fed him crushed herbs, bathed him in rose water, hired the best tutors. He clung to her like a shadow, never understanding the tension behind her smile. She moved easily through Roman society. Hosts adored her. Senators feared her. She never raised her voice, never asked for more than she was given. But when a rival's wife fell ill, or a cousin vanished during a festival, no one looked surprised. They said she had eyes like cold honey and a voice like oil, smooth, slow, heavy. They said she walked like someone who never expected to be stopped, and they were right, because she was no longer content to be the widow of men who held power. She wanted the throne, not beside it, not beneath it, on it. And there was only one path left: marriage to the emperor himself, her cousin, her blood. Rome murmured behind fans and togas, incest, obscenity. The old laws forbade it. But the emperor was weak, lonely, drowning in his own paranoia. She reached out a hand, and he took it. The wedding was quiet, not for modesty, for control. She didn't want to celebrate. She wanted submission. And now, with her son seated just a few chairs away from the throne, the path became clear. Remove the others, clear the board, build an empire from the bones of her own family. It wouldn't be quick, it wouldn't be clean, but it would be complete. She wasn't born a monster, but Rome doesn't leave anyone innocent for long. The day they married, no one cheered. Rome didn't know whether to clap or flinch. The emperor was older, not old but tired, suspicious, childless from too many wives and too much loss. He ruled from the Palatine like a man already half vanished, avoiding crowds, writing letters, trusting no one. He had dismissed his last wife 2 years earlier. Poison, they whispered, or exile, or a simple fall down the stairs. He never denied it. So when he married her, his cousin, the widow, the mother of a frail boy, Rome blinked. Some whispered incest. Others spoke of fate. Most said nothing, because the guards listened, and the emperor had grown fond of silence. She stepped into the palace, not as a bride, but as a strategist. Every move was calculated, her greetings timed, her words were measured. She didn't touch the emperor in public, didn't smile too much, didn't eat at feasts. She made herself a mirror for his paranoia. He trusted her almost immediately. Within weeks, she replaced his advisors. Quietly. One fell ill, one retired, one was caught in a scandal. Their replacements were loyal to her, not him. She offered no explanations, no apologies. The emperor didn't ask. He found comfort in her stillness. She soothed him without promising safety. She spoke rarely and always behind closed doors. When she did speak in court, senators leaned forward. Her voice was soft, but no one interrupted. She took no official title at first. She didn't need one. Power didn't require ceremony, it required control. She redressed the court. New colours, new fabrics, new rituals. The old guard bristled. The new bowed deeply. She organised processions, chose priestesses, arranged marriages for distant nieces she had never met. All of it was strategy. Each thread tied closer to her hand. And then she turned to the matter of succession. The emperor had nephews, healthy, ambitious, raised in Rome's finest houses. One had military command, another had senate favour. Neither had her blood. She saw the threat immediately. She summoned portraits, read every letter, spoke to their tutors. She arranged private meetings with the boys' mothers, offered gifts, then warnings. She smiled while tightening the cord. The first nephew died during a storm at sea. The second collapsed at a banquet. A seizure, they said. His wine tasted strange. The cupbearer vanished before sunrise. The emperor grieved. Quietly, she comforted him. Gently. Then she brought her son into the imperial chamber. The boy knelt, pale, silent. He looked nothing like a general, but the emperor was too tired to argue. He needed an heir, and this one, at least, was family. The Senate confirmed the adoption 2 weeks later. Rome erupted in whispered confusion. A boy with no military training, no Roman blood from his father. A teenager raised in private gardens, reading poetry while legions bled at the borders. And now he stood behind the emperor's throne, dressed in the purple of princes. He owed everything to her, and she reminded him of it. Often, she tutored him personally, hired philosophers, dictated letters, controlled his meals. She dismissed his wet nurses and replaced his tutors. No one reached him without her permission. And when he reached maturity, she arranged his first public appearance. It was staged like a festival, processions, music, sacrifice. But what Rome really watched was her, standing behind him, eyes fixed, shoulders straight, not proud, not maternal, possessive. She had done it, secured a future from a single marriage, placed her son one breath away from the imperial diadem, killed off every rival without a sword, and now all that remained was time. But time is cruel in palaces. Boys grow faster than expected. Their voices deepen, their gazes sharpen. The boy she moulded began to ask questions about power, about freedom, about how the others died, and for the first time she saw something familiar in his eyes. Herself. That was the danger, and it was coming faster than she had planned. He was still her son, but not her boy. Not anymore. He had grown taller. His voice had deepened. The palace guards bowed differently now, lower, slower. He no longer waited for her nod before speaking in council. He began composing letters without her, holding court without her, deciding things she used to decide. It was subtle at first, a dismissed advisor she had placed, a favoured servant reassigned. Then came the small defiance, missing a meeting, skipping a procession, refusing a robe she had chosen. He smiled less often, looked through her more often. Then he began to ask questions. Why had his cousin died so suddenly? Why had his uncle's legion never returned? Why were there no portraits of the emperor's former heirs in the gallery? She deflected, softly, spoke of politics, of necessity, of Rome's stability. But he was watching her now, closely, not like a child watching a parent, like a man watching a rival. The shift terrified her, not because he hated her, but because he was learning how power works. He had inherited her mind, her instincts, her silence. He was her creation. And like all creations, he had begun to outgrow his maker. He dined with senators without inviting her. He reviewed troops. He ordered new taxes. He began to speak of his own policies, his visions for Rome. She listened, smiled, applauded. But inside the cold returned. She remembered the early days, when he was sickly, fragile, coughing blood into silk cloths, crying in her arms. She remembered sitting beside his bed, whispering prayers not to the gods, but to herself, promising that if he lived he would be the tool through which she ruled. But tools don't speak, tools don't question, tools don't inherit. The palace became quieter. Her allies stepped back. He didn't remove them. He simply ignored them. The advisors he chose were younger, louder, loyal only to him. And outside the walls, Rome began to whisper again. Some said the empress had ruled long enough. Some praised the boy's new energy. Others saw him as a return to masculine strength after years of shadow rule. One senator even toasted, May Rome now be ruled by men again. She heard, she remembered. She also had another son, from her earlier marriage, older, duller, but still a threat. The boy had been kept quiet, distant, tucked away in villas with tutors and slaves. But now people remembered him. Senators sent letters, old generals visited. He was harmless, but his existence wasn't. Because in Rome, blood matters, and blood betrays. She invited him to dinner, a quiet one, just family. He arrived nervous, deferential, smiling too widely. He ate slowly. She poured the wine herself. He drank it all. They buried him before dawn. Cause of death, heart failure. Age, 21. Symptoms, none reported. No inquiry followed. No priests demanded testimony. He was mourned quietly and erased swiftly. The elder son was gone, but the younger, her heir, her prodigy, he had noticed. He didn't say a word at the funeral, didn't touch the food. When she reached for his arm, he stepped back. That night he posted 2 guards outside his chamber. Not hers. The shift was complete. He had become a threat. Not out of malice, not even out of ambition, but because he no longer needed her. And in Rome, anyone who doesn't need you eventually works to remove you. She had taught him well, too well, and now she would have to choose, protect her legacy or protect her child. But she already knew the answer. She always had. The palace was quiet that morning. No trumpet, no announcement, no guards posted at the gates. Inside, the marble floors had been scrubbed. The incense burned heavier than usual. A small procession waited behind the eastern colonnade. Just a priest, a medicus, and 2 slaves carrying an unmarked litter. He had been the weaker one. Not the heir, not the favourite, but still hers, still blood. She had nursed him through fevers, held his hand during temple rites, tucked amulets beneath his pillow. She hadn't loved him, not like mothers in poems, but she'd built him, shaped him, taught him to trust her completely. And that was the problem. He trusted her too much. He spoke her name too often in public, mentioned her during Senate discussions, let others know how deeply she influenced him. That kind of loyalty in a son was a liability, because in Rome, influence is a blade, and sooner or later someone decides to cut the hand holding it. The child was 17, still lanky, still growing, still unaware of how close the lion circled. He had begun to laugh louder in court, make decisions without her, refuse her suggestions, softly at first, then with small smirks. One night he confronted her. He asked directly, did she have anything to do with the death of his brother? She didn't answer, just looked at him, slowly, evenly, without blinking. He never asked again, but he stopped eating figs after that, so she changed tactics. She didn't touch his food. She didn't threaten his guards. She just waited. Until the Feast of Mars, a grand celebration, wine from Crete, roasted lamb, gold-plated dishes stacked high. Everyone watched the heir. He smiled, laughed, toasted the legions. He drank deeply, too deeply. He collapsed before the 4th course. The physicians were summoned, but no one rushed. The Empress didn't leave her seat. She sipped her wine as murmurs spread. The boy convulsed, vomited, turned pale. His body curled like a leaf in fire. She didn't look away. He died that night. The death was blamed on exhaustion, overindulgence, perhaps a sudden sickness. Rome accepted the story. It always did when fear walked ahead of truth. The funeral was swift. Closed casket. No public mourning. The Empress wore black but did not speak. She didn't need to. Her enemies understood. Her allies nodded. And her surviving son, the real heir, he watched everything. He said nothing. But that night he locked his doors, doubled his guards, refused all food not prepared by his own hand. She noticed, and smiled, because now he understood the lesson. No one, Not even a son is safe. Not when the crown is at stake. Poison was never random. It wasn't poured in haste or slipped with a trembling hand. Not in her world. Not in the palace. Not when the cost of failure was the Senate's blade or a soldier's quiet orders at midnight. No, when she was killed, it was a ritual, a language, a method, a performance. The tools were ordinary. That was the genius of it. Figures, wine, scented oils, all symbols of luxury, all capable of hiding death. The best poisons didn't taste, they didn't sting or leave residue. They burned the gut from within but smelled like honey. Some took hours, other days. The most elegant ones imitated fever, rising heat, weak limbs, eyes that rolled and closed. Illness, not murder. She knew them all. In her private chamber, past the silk curtains and lion-footed table, sat a box. Cedarwood. No lock. She didn't need one. Inside, small vials wrapped in linen, dusts, liquids, black seeds in wax, a folded parchment marked in her own hand. Each substance had a name, a dosage, a history. Some came from Alexandria, blended by desert monks and sold through priests. Others from Crete, smuggled in fish barrels. Some were old, older than Rome itself, passed through women's hands like dark inheritance. There was one powder that caused slow paralysis, breath shallow, voice lost, heart still beating. The victim could feel everything but couldn't move. She never used it more than once. Too cruel, even for her. The most reliable poisons were mixed during rituals, not for magic, though she let people believe that. The ritual was controlled. She ground the ingredients herself. She heated the blade. She timed the stirring. The act became part of her power, because in a world where men used armies, she used certainty. Once she tested a blend on a pig, watched it die in under an hour, quietly, no thrashing, just slow collapse. She ordered the pig buried in consecrated ground. Even death deserved a ceremony. She kept poison in unexpected places. Perfume, charcoal used for eye paint, ink, even the glue on scrolls. One message sent to a political rival was sealed with a paste that caused skin to blister. He never touched a scroll again. That too was a kind of power. Servants were selected for their silence. Some had seen too much to live. Others were rewarded, gently, slowly, until loyalty became love. And love, as she knew well, was just another word for obedience. Poison had another advantage. It left no martyrs. Knives made saints. Execution made symbols. But poison, it made questions, doubt, whispers. It turned bodies into mysteries and mysteries into fear. No one wanted to accuse an empress without proof, and she made sure there was never any. When her son's tutor grew bold, speaking in the forum about dangerous women behind the curtain, he developed a cough, then had a fever, then silence. His replacement bowed lower, spoke less. She never had to correct him. Even the kitchens became extensions of her will. Not just the food, but the heat, the salt, the timing. A meal that sat too long lost its edge. A drink too chilled raised suspicion. Poison worked best in routine, so she built a routine around it. The boy always took his wine late, always with honey, always from a red-rimmed goblet. So when the dose finally came, he wouldn't know. It would taste like every night before. The court never spoke of poison openly, but they felt it. On the way they sipped slower, in the way their eyes scanned every plate, in the trembling hands that accepted fig or fish or fruit from her servants. She walked through the halls like death wearing silk, not feared like a warrior, feared like a whisper, like a shadow behind the curtain, like a smell you can't place. She never ran, she never struck, she never raised her voice. And still, people died. Because in Rome, power didn't need to shout. It only needed to watch you swallow. He knew he wouldn't die of old age. Not anymore. He'd seen too much. Too many uncles gone. too many brothers buried before their voices had settled into adulthood, too many dinners served with ceremony and silence. He still called her mother, but only when others were listening. Behind closed doors, he called her nothing at all. He slept in a different room each week, changed his attendance, sent letters through men he didn't trust, just to see which ones returned sealed. He stopped drinking wine, ate only food from his own estate, refused figs. When she called for him, he didn't go alone. But he still went, because she was still his mother, because Roman sons obey, because fear is a habit. They no longer dined together. When they passed each other in the corridors, the servants watched their eyes instead of their words. No affection, no anger, just calculation. Two rulers waiting for the other to blink. The guards she placed outside his door, he replaced with his own. The advisors she promoted, he sent away. The spies she planted, he paid more. He never accused her, never publicly. He didn't need to. His survival was already a form of rebellion. Every day he breathed was proof she hadn't won yet. But he was alone. The Senate called him unstable. Whispers of madness floated through the bathhouses. The priesthood noted his absence from ritual. His own cousins refused to visit. He was still heir, still prince, still robed in purple, but the throne beneath him felt like stone. He stopped smiling. His skin grew pale. He began waking in the middle of the night, breath short, heart pounding. Some said he wandered the halls barefoot, checking the kitchens. Others said he spoke to the statues of the gods, begging them for one more sunrise. She watched him carefully, did nothing. She didn't need to. Fear was working faster than poison ever could. One day his tutor found a note beneath his sleeping mat, a list of names, people he no longer trusted, people he believed would kill him. The tutor handed it to the Empress. She burned it. That night he collapsed in the garden, not from poison, from exhaustion, from paranoia, from the pressure of being the last boy standing in a house paved with graves. He was carried inside, pale and trembling. He lived, but something in him broke. He stopped leaving his chambers, refused counsel, stared out the window for hours, wouldn't speak unless spoken to. When she entered his room, he turned his face to the wall. She didn't try to comfort him. There was no need, because she had already won. The boy she feared, the one with ambition, with spine, with questions, was gone. What remained was a shadow, an echo. He signed laws she placed in front of him, nodded when prompted, smiled on command, and then one morning he simply didn't wake. There was no convulsion, no gasping, just stillness. The physician said it was the heart. He was too young, they said. But not entirely surprising given the pressure, the grief, the legacy. The funeral was elegant. Torches lined the path to the tomb. Senators bowed low. Coins were scattered in the river. The Empress stood in mourning robes, face carved from marble. She wept, but only once, and only for the crowd. By sunset the banners were taken down. Rome prepared for a new ruler. But there was no one left. The bloodline had ended, and only she remained. The throne room stayed lit longer than usual, not because anyone sat on it. No one did. The torches were kept burning for appearance, for the ceremony, for denial. Because when a crown has no air beneath it, the silence gets heavy. The Empress didn't speak for 3 days after the last boy died, not even to her attendants. She ate alone, bathed alone, touched no paper, no wax seal, no ring. Some thought she was grieving, others said she was calculating. No one asked. When she returned to court, her voice was unchanged. She issued commands, dismissed 3 officials, reordered the treasury, oversaw a shipment of Egyptian linen. Her hands moved as before, but her eyes didn't. They stared through marble, through walls, through people, because there was nothing left to look at. The palace felt hollow, Not just quieter, emptier. Laughter had vanished. So had gossip. Guards stood straighter, slaves walked slower. No one wanted to be noticed. The portraits had been removed, one by one. The sun's images once hung beside emperors and gods, now gone. Taken down without fanfare, replaced with tapestries or left bare. Even their names were whispered less. She never spoke to them again. Some said she kept a room sealed at the end of the eastern corridor. The last boy's chamber, untouched, still perfumed, still arranged as if he might return. But no one was allowed inside. The Senate grew uneasy. There was no heir, no husband, no family. The Empress ruled alone, and Rome doesn't trust women who rule alone. Whispers returned. Had she gone mad? Had the gods withdrawn their favour? Should someone else be offered the throne? She heard it all, said nothing. But new guards appeared in the forum. Senators found themselves questioned. Letters vanished in transit. Fear crept in again. Because even with no heir, no crown prince, no dynastic future, she still ruled. For a time. Then the people began to starve. A drought struck the southern farms. Grain ships failed to arrive. Merchants blamed pirates. Priests blamed omens. The Empress blamed no one. She simply tightened rations. Riots followed. Small ones. Broken market stalls. Looted shrines. A torch thrown at a gate. The crowd shouted for justice. Then someone shouted her name. And suddenly it wasn't about food anymore. It was about memory. The deaths. The missing boys. The silence. What had once been a rumour became rage. The palace gates were shut. The Empress withdrew. She left ministers to handle the mobs. But mobs don't care for ministers. They want faces. They want blame. They want blood. Her allies vanished. One drowned on his way to Greece. Another poisoned himself before trial. The last simply fled and never returned. The Empress was alone. And now the silence wasn't power. It was an exile. One morning the torches weren't lit. The throne room was dark. The guards were gone. No decree had been issued. No heir had been named. Just stillness. They say she spent her final days in the upper quarters, curtains drawn, meals untouched, hair unbound. She had won, and she had no one to tell. Rome moved on. It always does. A new name was carved on a new coin. Her name was scratched from temples. Her statues were taken down. Her image was removed from mosaics. She had ruled through suns, through death, through shadows, and now she was forgotten. But power doesn't leave quietly. It leaves a smell, a weight in the air, a memory no one speaks aloud, but everyone recognizes. In quiet corners of the palace, they say her sandals can still be heard, pacing across stone, looking for someone to obey her, someone to fear her. Someone left, but there's no one, only the throne and the echo